Hello everybody and welcome to my channel where I make all things from home and show you how along the way. Today I'm going to be making some artisan sourdough bread. This is my sourdough starter that I made. It's going to be the first ingredient that you need. The first thing that you're going to want to do is measure 3/4 of a cup of your sourdough starter and put it into a large mixing bowl. And since that used up most of my starter, I'm gonna just go ahead and feed it really quick before I continue. I'm measuring out 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour and adding it to my starter. And then I'm just gonna use some room temperature lukewarm water. And I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it when I add it to my starter. I'm gonna add a little bit and then mix it, and then if it needs it, I'll add a little bit more. You really just want it to be a thick, sticky consistency without any dry pieces of flour in it. This is what you want it to look like. Not runny, but just thick and kind of sticky. And then you know it's good to go. Then you just get your towel and your rubber band and you cover your jar back up. And you just set it aside and then you're good to continue. So to your bowl of sourdough starter, you're gonna add about 1.5 cups of water. That's the same temperature that you just used to feed your sourdough starter. And then you're gonna use either your hands or a whisk and just combine that really well until the sourdough starter is completely dissolved. And then once your sourdough starter is completely dissolved in the water, you're gonna wanna add about 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And then you're just gonna use your hand and start combining everything together. You don't wanna knead it. You just wanna kind of use a circular scooping motion to just lump everything together into a rough, kind of shaggy dough. And then mine was still a little bit too sticky, so I just added in another maybe 1/4 cup of flour and just slowly kind of scooped it in. My camera wouldn't focus there for a minute. Yeah, and just kind of gently scooped it in. Again, making sure you don't overwork your dough. You just want to barely combine it and make sure it's not super sticky. And then you can see some of it's kind of clinging to my hand there, so I'm just scraping off the excess back into the bowl. And after I scrape off that excess, I'm just going to cover it with a dish towel, or you can use plastic wrap. And I'm just letting it sit unbothered for about 30 minutes. Next, I'm gonna go in with some salt. I kind of just eyeball it. It's probably about 1/2 tablespoon, but I just sprinkle it over the top of the dough. And then this part's important. You want to get your hand wet so it doesn't stick to the dough. And then just use your fingers and squish that salt into the dough to help it absorb. And once you finish squishing that in, you're just gonna get your hand wet again and grab an edgy dough and stretch it up and then fold it over towards the middle and kind of stick it down. And you're just gonna wanna go all the way around the edge of the bowl till you've pulled all that dough in towards the center. And after it's rested for another 30 minutes, then you're just gonna take the cover off and repeat that step again. And you're gonna wanna do this a total of 4 to 5 times, just stretching and folding it and then letting it rest for 30 minutes in between. And after this last set of stretch and folds, you're gonna wanna cover it again and leave it overnight. And then this is the next morning. It's about 4 a.m. I'm getting ready to go to work, but before I go, I'm just gonna get my dough, and here you can see it's doubled in size. It's really nice and puffy and smooth on top. So I'm just gonna dump it out onto the countertop. You just wanna make sure it's on a clean and dry surface. You don't want to flour your surface because you want your dough to have just a little bit of grip so you can shape it more easily. I've noticed if you flour it, it kind of slides around too much. So, and you just want to wet your hands so your dough doesn't stick to your hands. And here I'm stretching it out into a rectangle. This is going to be a boule-shaped dough. So yeah, I'm just stretching it, and then I'm going to fold each side in to make a long, narrow strip. And then once I do that, I'm just going to roll it up into a tight burrito shape towards me. Sorry, that's my son playing in the background that you hear. And then I'm just gonna turn it again and roll it up the opposite way a second time until it's in a tight ball shape. And then I'm just gonna cup with my hand and kind of scoop it towards me along the countertop in a dragging motion to kind of tuck all the ends under and make it into a nice tight ball shape and kind of form that tension on top. And you just want to handle your dough really gently because there's going to be a lot of air bubbles in there and you want those. So you just have to be careful not to pop them. Sometimes I accidentally do, but ideally you just want to be as gentle as possible. And then I'm just getting a dish towel and a small mixing bowl that I'm going to use to proof my dough in. I'm going to lay out my towel here. And then I'm just going to get some more of that all-purpose flour and sprinkle it all over the towel and make sure I just spread it over it really well. And this is just because if you don't flour the towel, your dough is going to stick to it and it's basically going to destroy your dough. So every surface that your dough is going to touch, you want covered with flour. You don't need a ton, just a little bit, but spread it out really, really well and get it into all the crevices. And then once you finish flouring it, you're gonna wanna pick it up and just lay it in your bowl like this and press it down in there. And then you're just gonna want to pick up your dough carefully and lay it in the bowl with the seam side facing up. Yeah. Ideally, you would want to wet your hands before you do this because the dough stuck to my skin pretty good. Yeah. But it was okay in the end. I ended up getting it all right. After this, you're just going to want to cover your dough and then place it in the fridge for anywhere from 6 to 48 hours. I leave mine in about 9 to 10 hours. I work an 8-hour shift, so it's after work whenever I get around to it. And then you're going to want to preheat your oven with a Dutch oven in it to 500 degrees and just let that get nice and hot. And once I'm done with that, I get my knife. I'm just using an X-Acto blade here. You can really use any kind of sharp blade. And then I'm just making some small decorative diagonal cuts down the top of the bread. This part is actually optional, so you don't have to do this part if you don't want to. But the next cut I'm gonna make actually is not optional, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And once you're done making those cuts, you're gonna wanna get your Dutch oven out from your preheated oven and carefully remove the lid. And you're gonna wanna pick up your bread using the parchment paper and gently lower it into your Dutch oven. I'm gonna bake my dough with the lid on for about 30 minutes, and then after that 30 minutes, I'm gonna take off the lid and allow it to bake for another 20 minutes to get that crust really nice and golden brown.